Now, I'll be the first to admit, when it comes to gait, foot health, and the complex relationship between what we wear on our feet and how we move, I've been a little bit in the dark. But that's exactly why I'm excited for today's conversation. I'm chatting with a true expert, Courtney Conley. Courtney is an internationally renowned foot and gait specialist. We've all heard about the importance of a good bike fit, stretching, core work, but so few of us pay attention to foot health. Your footwear choices and your cleat setup, they could be causing you back pain, neck pain, knee pain, or just putting the brakes on your ability to generate power when you're on the bike. This is a conversation which I think you're going to get a lot of value from, and hopefully you'll really enjoy. I'm proud to introduce Courtney Conley. Corey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me, Courtney. So I know very little about foot health. I know less about the relationship between foot health and overall health. So that's my goal today. I want you to try and help me understand that relationship between foot health and overall health. Or even to start off, is there a relationship between foot health and overall health?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And I think I'm always surprised, especially with people that are, active and training for any type of sport, because we always look at the rest of the body. We're strength training our quads and our hamstrings and our glutes, yet we seem to ignore our first interface with the ground, which is our feet. And because it is our first interaction with the ground, we have receptors and spindles and proprioceptors that are all communicating with our vestibular system to keep us upright and bipedal. So from a walking perspective, the health of our feet is imperative to keep us in a walking gait. And then if you take the foot health perspective, I always say to my patients, it's like you're building a house on sand. You have to be strong from the ground up. And when we talk about, I'm diving right into it. We're just going to go right into it. When we talk about kinetic chain efficiency, it's the foot and the strength of the foot and the strength of the ankle and the strength of our plantar flexors that also contributes to that kinetic chain efficiency. So I think to ignore the strength of our feet when it is something that's going to carry us late into our years from a longevity perspective is really detrimental to our health.
Does the type of footwear I choose, I want to phrase this in two different ways, because the type of footwear I choose, A, that's impacting the ground, and B, connection between cycling shoe and pedal, because assumably that's a different connection to foot impacting the ground. Does that choice of footwear on both counts, does that impact our gait and our overall movement patterns?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And this is how I like to broach this, because think of it as having a shoe spectrum. Our foot wants to be in I have my foot model here. This is Eddie. I'm a Pearl Jam fan, so that's why his name's Eddie. Our foot wants to be in its functional position, which is splayed. The toes should be splayed. It makes sense, right? Because that looks like it would be easier to balance, right, than when my toes are squished together. The foot is it does different things. It's a mobile adapter. So the arch can recoil, and that's what gives us strength. So in an ideal world, when we're wearing footwear that allows our foot to get stronger, that's where we want to live. So that would be a shoe that has a wide toe box, for example. And there's a difference between a wide toe box and a wide shoe. So don't get confused there. A lot of companies will say this is a wide shoe. That's very different than a wide toe box. The toes need to be able to splay. A shoe that has a thinner stack height. So the stack height is the amount of cushion between the sole of your foot and the ground. So I mentioned we have all those receptors on the bottoms of the feet. They want to feel, because that afferent or that sensory information that goes to our brains helps our motor output. So when we put a lot of stuff between what we're supposed to be feeling in the ground, we start to lose some of that sensory input, which is not ideal.
Do you think all that applies to cycling shoes as well, and the connection between pedal and cycling shoe? Because obviously it's I have my mobile phone for anyone that's listening on audio, and I'm on Apple, whatever the second newest one is, 14. Like a pedal is maybe 1/3 of the size of this as a contact point. So we don't have a very wide base of a contact point like a flat pedal on a typical commuter bike. It's a narrower point that we're connected into with a cycling shoe. So how does what you've talked about and the need for the toes to spread out in that wider toe box, how does that transfer into choice for cycling shoes?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain sports, for example, cycling, where the fit of the cycling shoe, we want it to feel snug. We want it to feel stable, right? Which is a whole different ballgame than, when we're walking on the street. Now, with that being said, I do believe, and there are cycling shoe companies out there now that are making the toe boxes a little bit wider. I think of all the diagnoses I treat. I live out in Colorado, and I'm a cyclist myself. I treat a lot of cyclists, and the diagnoses often that we will see in the forefoot. So things like, just pain along the metatarsals or neuromas. Those are all very common diagnoses, and it's when that foot doesn't have the ability to splay. Now, the way I'll describe this to my patients is that if you are going to be in your cycling shoe for X amount of time, and you're not going to budge on the type of cycling shoe you're wearing, either by making a wider toe box or adjusting the cleat or what have you, then you need to pay very close attention to what you're doing with your foot when you're not in the cleat.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the win becomes.
What I've suffered from in the past is hot foot. Have you experienced this, or have you had patients experiencing this?
Yes.
What causes that?
When you think about, can we go deep into some of the mechanics here?
Of course, deeper the better.
All right. Our foot is technically a tripod, right? So we have the heel, I have the big toe, and I have my little toe. The foot should dissociate. So we have a rear foot, a midfoot, and a forefoot. So the foot doesn't move as a paddle. It moves in separation to each of the parts. And that's important that we have that foot dissociation. When we are in footwear and or cleats, and we start to take away some of that foot dissociation. So in other words, my tissues might get tight or restricted. My foot doesn't have the ability to dissociate. So follow me here, okay? In a normal foot, we have the heel, and then the front of the foot sits in a little bit of what we call a varus inclination. So it's like this little bit of tilt here. Okay, and this should be familiar to the cycling audience, because there are these varus wedges, right, that you can put into the cycling shoe to kind of compensate for a little bit of that. So if I have this foot that doesn't have the ability to dissociate, and my foot gets very stiff and rigid, when I go to get up out of the saddle, for example, instead of having separation where my rear foot and my forefoot can move separately from one another, the whole foot starts to move as a unit. And so we start to put more load through certain areas. Things start to get irritated, for example. And then you just start picking diagnoses. So rather than chase the diagnoses around at the foot, I always say, let's pay attention to what you're putting into the shoe. Let's get your foot to be more mobile. Let's get your foot to be stronger to help accommodate for what's happening when your foot is in the cleat.
Okay, that's very interesting. So if anyone's experiencing like it's hot foot, any sort of pains in their foot, which I know like long distance ultra endurance cyclists, they do experience this where almost, you might go 6 hours and you get to the calf and you've, multiple 6 hour stints still to go, all as part of one single race. And that inclination is as soon as you get to the calf and you're dehydrated, you still just want to get your shoes off. You just want that little bit of relief while you're refilling your water bottles. Just let me take my shoes off for 2 seconds here and just relieve that pain before strapping them back in. So a lot of what you're saying there makes sense because it's almost like that. It feels like an exhalation, like I'm letting my toes breathe. I'm letting them spread just for a second or two, and then they're back into their restricted, format. Roadman, whether you're a weekend warrior or a world tour rider, the right tools can make all the difference. Enter 4i's Precision 3 Plus Power Meter, the latest innovation from 4i, designed to help you reach peak performance. The Precision 3 Plus Power Meter is a compact yet powerful unit. It weighs just 9 grams and it's packed with features that set it apart, including integration with Apple's Find My network, giving you the peace of mind by letting you track your power meter wherever it is. Plus, you've got up to 800 hours of battery life. We all know that accuracy is key, and 4i's delivers a groundbreaking plus or minus 1% accuracy thanks to their unique 3D strain gauge technology. For those seeking even more data, the Precision 3 Plus Pro Power Meter offers dual-sided power meter metrics, giving you detailed insights into pedaling efficiency, torque effectiveness, and left-right balance. 4i's offers versatile product options to suit your needs. Choose from ride-ready power meters with pre-installed units on Shimano cranks, or up for factory-installed power meter where you send in your crankset for a custom installation. Ready to elevate your cycling game? Trust 4i's Precision 3 Plus Power Meter. Precision, performance, and peace of mind all in one. Learn more by visiting 4iiii.com. That's 4iiii.com. I'm going to put that in the description down below.
I love that. I love that analogy. And I think if we paid attention, like the second I get off my bike, I have a little routine that I do. It's like, and it's simple. I roll the bottom of my foot. I interlace my fingers in my toes, right? To give them that splay that they're craving, that they're not getting in the shoe, regardless of, the type of cycling shoe I have. I have a wider toe box. And then I'll massage in between the metatarsals, and I really mobilize that foot. And I think that's important because when you get out of the cleat or when you get out of a, restrictive running shoe and you don't pay attention to those things, it's repetition over time. Things just get more restricted and more uncomfortable. So I think it's those little things that can really go a very long way.
So I guess the way I'm approaching this is there's two sides to this. Maybe first we'll deal with how can we make the shoe a little bit more comfortable and how can we improve our life while we are inside that shoe? And then secondly, I think it's the part off the bike. By the time we actually get into the shoe, how are we giving ourselves a better chance? Like how can we have better foot health in the 23 hours of the day when we aren't riding the bike? So for the 1 hour of the day we are riding the bike, we get in there and we're in a better position to combat this less than optimum position that we're in. So if we start maybe with the former, when I am in the cycling shoe, is there anything I can do to mitigate this inevitable damage? Like when I go to my bike fit specialist and he's fitting my cleats, or when I go into my local run shop and he's talking about a gait analysis, is there value in that, or is that a little bit of a bullshitty marketing scam to sell me an expensive set of runners or shoes?
I mean, I think when you think about extrinsic modifications, so that would be like, your metatarsal pad in the shoe, right? The varus posts that we'll see often in cycling shoes. Extrinsic modifications or any type of orthotic is a load modifier. So I think the jury is still out on why exactly they work. We're not really sure, but we do know that it's force, right? So it's not just a kinematic change. We have a kinetic change. So it's forces and motion. So when we go in to get a gait analysis or we go to get our bike fit, which I highly recommend those things because especially on a bike, we say it's a sagittal plane kind of monster sport, right? But there's frontal plane and transverse plane motions occurring on the bike. And so when there are structural variants like torsions and different changes in the foot, that's when I think that bike fit can be extremely important. Keeping this in mind, though, that these extrinsic modifications, you got to pay attention to the intrinsic piece of it. So, in other words, if I pay attention to the strength of my foot, then the extrinsic modifications become icing on the cake. Like if I put a very strong foot into a shoe, like a super shoe, right? It's going to give me 2 to 4% running economy. Now I'm stacking. I got a strong foot, I got a strong calf, and I'm putting it on top of a shoe that's going to cheat the system a little bit. That's how I like to view that, rather than saying I'm going to strictly rely on extrinsic modifications to improve my performance.
What's the link between neglecting foot health and other type injuries? Because you mentioned super shoes. I've had some amazing marathon runners in the podcast. They didn't have data on it, but observationally, they said since the super shoes have been introduced, the number of injuries have just gone up tenfold. And it got me wondering, as you were speaking there, is this magnifying our poor foot health and it's manifesting in just extra injuries?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I tell my patients, my runners, you got to earn your right to run in that shoe. And that means you better do the work if you want to run in this type of shoe. And if not, then yes, you are going to see an increased rate of injuries because it's changing the mechanics. It, for example, might increase stride length, which is going to put more load on certain tissues, Achilles and hamstring, for example. So you have to earn your right to be in what I like to call the cheater shoes. So I'm not saying don't ever wear those shoes. I'm just saying spend more time in footwear where there's going to be more load through your bones, through your muscles, through your tendons. You're going to have to work harder in a more minimal shoe, which isn't a bad thing. And being able to dance along that spectrum, right? Where, hey, I'm going to go walk barefoot for 10 minutes. Awesome. And then you want to go do your tempo runs in your super shoe? Fine. But you'll put a strong body into that super shoe.
Yeah, because as cyclists, I suppose the equivalent is the runners in the super shoe, they're getting all sort of stress fractures, I'm saying. I can't speak only from a few friends who are in that world, but I know in the cycling world, the most prevalent injuries by far are knee injuries and back injuries. What do you think is the relationship between those and foot health?
I mean, again, I think our athletes are getting bigger and stronger. The whole... when I first started cycling, strength training for us really wasn't talked about 20, 25 years ago.
Even
but
10
now
years ago, it was a little bit dubious.
And now it's becoming a thing. It really, in all sports, is strength training. You can't build a jet engine on a paper airplane. So if you're getting bigger and stronger and bigger and stronger, but you're not paying attention to the foundation of where all that weight and load is going, you're going to run into problems. Our foot takes on multiple times of our body weight when we're walking, when we're running, the Achilles tendon. So we have to keep the strength and capacity up from a foot and ankle perspective in order to have that carry over into efficiency up the kinetic chain.
Okay, Courtney, I'm your patient X here. So I'm doing absolutely zero to optimize my foot health at the moment. So, and I think quite a few of our listeners are going to be in that bracket where they're like, I didn't even know this was a thing. We have that category of stuff we know we don't know. This is in this category of stuff I didn't even know I didn't know. So now I'm like, I'm kind of questioning. I got a set of Nike Pegasus last week for running in. I have new cycling shoes from Quack on the way. And it's like, have I made real bad choices here? So what can I do from a Pareto principle here to optimize my health? Like, what's the 20% of stuff I can do that's really going to give me the biggest gains in foot health?
Yeah, I love this question because, when I talk about this and I teach this, it's like, we have to do another thing. I have to watch my diet. I got to strength train. And now you want me to do my big toe exercises. So I have this kind of dialed down to what I will initially tell people. Keep it simple. Because there's so many receptors on the bottoms of our feet, little things can light up our brains very quickly. So things like rolling the bottoms of the feet, doing what I call toe yoga, which is being able to isolate just lifting your big toe versus lifting your four toes. It sounds so simple, but for those of us who have been in restrictive footwear or have a very poor awareness of our feet, this will become extremely difficult for them to do. Things like lifting all of your toes and spreading them and reaching them forward. And these are the things that we can do sitting at our desk. So, super simple. When you get out of your cleat, literally take 5 minutes, interlace your fingers and your toes, work through the soft tissue in the top of the foot. I mean, like I mentioned, the neuromas that I see with my cyclists, um, I see a lot of them because the stability of the forefoot isn't there. So those little things can go a long way.
And is that going to take work? Like, even I'm trying this under the desk here as we're talking, and it seems like that lifting the big toe versus having that ability to communicate that message down to lift my four toes separately, it doesn't feel like that's something that's coming super intuitively to me off the bat. Roadman, I'm going to date myself here, but I've been riding the bike for almost 20 years. And in that time, I've cycled through every cycling apparel brand out there. And I kept swapping out different apparel brands each season until I found Lacoste. There's something really different about Lacoste, and as soon as you slip into the gear, you notice it feels different, it feels better. I've had the pleasure of chatting with Yanto Barker on the podcast. He's the Lacoste founder, and his dedication to crafting the fastest, most refined cycling apparel out there, it's nothing short of inspiring. Yanto isn't just trying to create gear. I get the feeling he's actively and obsessively trying to perfect cycling gear. Trust me, as soon as you slip on the Lacoste kit, as soon as you zip up that jersey, you can feel that commitment. The proof for Lacoste, it's in the pudding. This is the same kit that Jay Hindley wore when he clinched overall victory in the Giro d'Italia. There's a confidence that comes with wearing apparel that's been battle tested and podium proven in races like the Giro d'Italia. Trust me, feeling good on the bike means you're going to perform better. If you have a second, I highly advise you to jump on over to lacoste.cc and check out their amazing range of kit and experience this feeling for yourself.
Oh, Anthony, I lost you there.
Sorry, I lost you there, Courtney. I'll repeat that question. Can you hear me again?
Okay. Yep, go ahead.
So I'm here kind of secretly practicing under the desk, Courtney, as we're talking, and it doesn't feel like that ability to lift my big toe versus lift my other four toes is coming really intuitively to me. Is this something that needs work? It's like building a muscle in the gym. It needs repetition.
Oh, yeah. And think about this. If you can't do things like that, it's toe dexterity. It lights up a part of our homunculus, a part of our brain. So I always explain it to my patients. It's like having static on a phone. Like there's no clear message going from your foot to your brain, which means that the motor output is going to be affected. And when we can start to increase that sensory input, things just start to function better. And it's really exciting because, you'll see people try to lift their big toe and they'll like try to lift their fingers and, their whole kind of body is trying to facilitate with their...
there when I'm doing it. The whole desk is coming up.
Well, and it's really interesting because typically the foot you will have symptoms on, like plantar fasciitis, heel pain, is typically the foot where you will not be able to dissociate. And there's 4 layers of intrinsic muscles in the foot. They need to be strong. That big toe is a powerhouse, and it's power. It's power to the foot.
There's an Irish runner, and I'm not sure how widely known she is internationally, but she put down a lot of very good times in terms of Irish athletics and got some prominence on a world stage. Katrina McKiernan, she's a huge advocate for barefoot running at the moment. Is there sense in barefoot walking, barefoot jogging? Talk to me about the pros and cons of that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they're really looking, there's really cool research coming, looking at patients that have had chronic heel pain and having them use barefoot running as a treatment. Because when your foot is on the ground, like I said, there's more load going through your tissues. And if we do that wisely, That's where the transition comes into play. We can really start to build a strong foot foundation. And I like to preface that by saying that transition is important. If you say, go take your shoes off and go run 3 miles, and your foot hasn't seen the ground since you were a baby, probably not the best way to go about doing that.
Yeah.
But start with like 10 minutes, feel the ground, and your foot will start to get stronger. And that has incredible implications for movement efficiency.
What about these runners that are kind of purported to bring us back to close and walk into barefoot? Like, trying to think of some brands off the top of my head, like Vivo Barefoot or Vibram Five Fingers, things like this.
Yeah, so I have this is a Vivo Barefoot. See how it's like
oh, nice,
nothing to it, wide toe box, right? Because I want my foot to be able to, feel the ground. The stack heights of the shoe. So like this is an Ultra, for example. You see how there's more cushion here. So if you're not used to going with very, very thin sole, they have options out there now where you can still let the toes splay, which is a non-negotiable for me. That's why, like, as soon as I get out of my cycling shoes, I put toe spacers on. I'm wearing them right now because I want that the toe splay. But you can wear these in all of these shoes because the foot is able to splay. But you can play around with the stack height if you're, for example, walking in New York City all day long, or you're walking on concrete and you haven't quite adjusted to something so thin.
And even like for me, I always wear socks in the house. Like, I don't know what, like for no reason other, maybe, I don't know, it feels cozy. Should I not be wearing socks to give my space staff feet to, as you say, splay?
I mean, that's a whole conversation. I actually haven't worn socks in probably 5 years because I can't find any. I'm like obsessed with this stuff now. But toe socks are an option. But again,
what are toe socks? Like individual, like they're like gloves for your toes?
Yes.
That's weird. I think I'll go sockless.
I'm gonna have to send you a pair. I think it takes people longer to actually put them on.
Especially in the dark.
Yes. But I wear these all the time. So, I don't like to have anything kind of constricting my foot. So it is preference. But any type of like compression sock, for example, if you look at your foot in the way it was designed to be, and then you go ahead and put a compression sock on, you'll see everything just and I'm not saying there's not a time and place for that. I'm just saying every once in a while, let your toes breathe a little bit.
And the goal of, I suppose, going barefoot, as you say, if your feet haven't touched the ground since you're 2-3 years old, you're building up muscles and strength in your foot, which you haven't. But I'm thinking in terms of like a graded adaptation to getting there, is there specific exercise you'd suggest that we can enhance strength and flexibility in a more controlled environment before transitioning to the more hardcore walking or running barefoot?
Oh, yeah. So the things that I've mentioned previously are more sensory kind of dexterity. But from a strength perspective, we'll start people with banded toe exercises. So like they'll put a band at their heel, they'll just take it's like, I call it doing a bicep curl for your big toe. And I get very excited about it because if I don't, then they're not going to get excited about strengthening their big toe. Okay. So it's like 40, 50 reps with the big toe. They shift the band over to the four toes, 40 to 50 reps with the four toes. That's kind of an entry level exercise. Then we can start to progress them into things like calf raises. I'm a big fan of all things calf raise. The intrinsic muscles of the foot come into play. They're active when the heel comes off the ground. Think about when you get up out of the saddle. So I want a strong foot. I want a strong calf. So we'll progress them into things like that. And then we go into functional movement with strength, and then things like plyometrics, like jumping rope is fantastic. And those things you don't need to do for a very long periods of time, and you also don't need to do them every day.
And is there data on this? Like, what data have you seen from someone that's increasing toe strength?
Oh, there sure is, Anthony, and I would love to sit here and tell you about it. So, toe strength is becoming like a very popular topic. In fact, because longevity studies are becoming the thing to talk about. We want to live longer, but we want to live longer and live well. One of the biggest predictors of falling as we age, this is Karen Mickle's research, is a weakness in toe strength. So, when our feet lose their strength, and when we age, we also lose sensory reception. So we can't feel as well, and our toes aren't as strong. It's the biggest predictor of falling when we get older.
Well, like when you say one of the biggest predictors,
to me,
like
it's an imperative thing that we pay attention
like,
to.
Have a coming into
because
my own biases, but
falls
when I
are
think
a
about
factor,
someone falling,
and they can be extremely dangerous as we age. So that's the kind of research that's coming out right now, which I just find to be fascinating because I think it's an easy win for us.
like when I think about someone falling, I think about so many other things rather than toe strength. Like I think about, overall strength. I think about speed, that ability to get my foot back out ahead. I think about balance. I think about agility. I would assume there's a lot of critics to that research.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, when you see when people fall, it's at the initiation of gait. So if I was going to walk towards you, and whoever's listening, if they're at home, if you were to stand up and lean into a wall, right? So you want your nose to come as close to the wall as possible. What is stopping you? It's your toes. You'll feel your toes engage first because that is what's stopping you from falling. So most of the falls occur at the initiation of gait when we start to ambulate. And if the toes aren't going to help you, then you can be as fast as you want, but you're not going to, these lower extremity injuries happen very, very quickly. So by the time you would have the, cognizance to be like, oh, let me, kind of lunge or whatever, you're going to be on the ground.
And what do you think is coming down the pipeline to improve our gait? Is there improvements in the type of footwear we're using, or is there improvements? Maybe it's just a general awareness because that for me has been the piece I'm missing up to now. And I've definitely got to go and, pull more at the thread of a lot of stuff you've said today. Roadman, I know how serious you take your goal setting, whether they're fitness or life-related goals. If you're looking for a powerful ally to support you on this journey, look no further than HUEL. HUEL has become my secret weapon for when I don't have time to prepare a balanced meal. It ensures I get the nutrition I need without sacrificing time or taste. Plus, it stops me from reaching for that takeaway menu. I always throw a bottle into my backpack when I'm heading into the city to work, and it stops me eating junk convenience foods, snacking on croissants and bars of chocolate, because I know they don't support my training goals. It's a handy, nutritious meal on the go, and it's got over 22 grams of protein. HUEL is perfect for athletes that don't have time to cook or prepare food before a training session. It's convenient, nutritious fuel at your fingertips, ensuring you hit your daily fueling needs for that session. HUEL Ready to Drink has 26 essential vitamins and minerals in every single bottle. You're getting a whopping 175 health benefits. Plus, it's made from natural ingredients like topeka, sunflower seed, coconut, and more. The best part, it's the flavors. There's 8 crazy, beautiful flavors. Iced coffee is what's in my backpack right at the moment. You can get HUEL directly to your home. All you got to do is head on over to the HUEL website, huel.com/Roadman.
Yeah, I think you basically nailed it with those 2 points. I think that the footwear is a huge factor. I think that our footwear has, if you think about it, if I walked around with a sling on my bicep for 30 years, my arm would get weaker. If you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So I think there is going to be this transition into, more functional footwear because it's an easy win. I mean, there was a research study that Sarah Ridge did that looked at people just wearing minimalist footwear. So a little bit of stack height, wide toe box. And then they also had a group that did foot exercises. And when you look at the muscles that they looked at, the group that just wore the shoes, didn't do any of the exercises, got almost as strong as the group that did the foot exercises, which I think is like, if somebody's not going to be non-compliant and they're not going to do their foot exercises, at least get them into a shoe where they know that they're going to start to gain strength. And I always say about that study, they're missing one group. If they would have stacked behaviors, right? Wear the right footwear when you can. Do a couple of foot exercises. This isn't an all-day gig. Just do a couple things. And then you can really start to see that strength from the ground up. And I think it's exciting.
Why are we making shoes so badly? Like, why are all the leading manufacturers not jumping on this?
That's a great question. If you look at, I'm actually writing a book right now on all of this. And if you look at the introduction of footwear, of when we started to get into changes in the structure of the shoe, it was around the 1970s. And if you look at research of running related injuries, I find this to be interesting. It started to happen a little bit more around that same time. And so I think our footwear, we need to be very cognizant of that. Now, just to be clear, there's going to be runners that be like, I am not giving up my super shoes. There is a time and a place. There is a time and a place. So the footwear, I think, is being designed to facilitate our gait. Things like a toe spring, for example. So a toe spring in a shoe, right? Like facilitates the rocker of the foot. You put that on your foot, you're going to be like, damn, this is so comfortable. And I feel like I can, I'm going to PR this race. Now, when your foot is in this position though, the research will tell you that toe spring can inhibit the strength of the foot. So if we're going to be on this whole, we want these shoes to do a lot of the performance for us, we cannot forget about what we're putting into them. So if we want to roll with the technology, I think we have to pay attention to what we're putting in them, or we're just going to see injury after injury. So I'm not anti-performance shoe. I'm anti-performance shoe just relying on the performance shoe.
And I think this conversation is so important for cycling at the moment, because we're in a trend where bike races are getting longer and longer and longer, and the type of challenges people are taking on. I have my own personal idea, and I think initially we gravitated to this kind of, I done 100 mile at the weekend, and there was a shock factor when you went back to the office on a Monday and you told a coworker you rode 100 mile at the weekend.
Yeah.
But as that's become more and more normalized, we've sought out more and more epic challenges. So now you're seeing people going, I'm going to ride Badlands. It's a 780 kilometer race, and these multi-day non-stop races, which are putting and exposing so many problems that we have, in our gait, in our, overall physiology and our biomechanics.
Yeah. I mean, I always joke around. I mean, gone are the days of the 5K. I mean, I'm in Colorado. It's like, if you're not doing a 50K or 100K, then, it's crazy what I've seen in my practice as far as the ultra world really like taking things by storm, and which is fine. But I think we need to pay attention to our bodies and how we're going to be able to handle those loads and to be able to handle that capacity, which is why I think the strength training is kind of marrying all of this, because you got to be strong. And to ignore the foot as we're getting bigger and stronger is a detriment to what we're doing.
Courtney, thank you very much for your time. I've loved this conversation.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this video and you want to keep binge watching the content, check this video. It's a cracker. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That way I can catch you in the next one. See you then.